So, last year, our class went to Scotland for our class trip. We were in a small city called Stirling, in a public park, and all of a sudden, 6 kids came to us. They started yelling super racist stuff at us. They were, throwing things, and put simply, they just didn't want us in the park. Yet, now, fast forward to about 2 weeks later when we were asked if we want to do this talk. So, we knew the idea of racism as a topic would be a nice one, but it was really broad. So, we decided to narrow it down to a question lots of people should start asking themselves. How can we define racism?
You see, racism is multifaceted. It has more than one aspect. And when defining something, there are questions we should ask. Here are just a few. The first one is, what does racism mean? Well, according to the Oxford Dictionary, racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone based on the belief that one's own race is superior. And this is kind of true, because there's many different types of racism. One of them is individual racism, or also known as stereotypical racism, which is when someone believes that their race is greater based on experiences they've had with that race or stereotypes. But then there's also things like interpersonal racism, which, for example, is when someone decides not to give a job to someone based on their race. The second question is, what's racism's origin? Racism was first used by a man named Richard Henry Pratt in 1902. Richard was an interesting man, to say the least. He created the first Native American boarding school that were designed to kill the Indian and save the man. He believed that he could turn Native Americans into law-abiding citizens by completely banning any sort of Native American culture.
The third question you could ask is, well, what's an anti-racist opinion on this? Have you guys heard of Abraham Lincoln? Yes? Good. So, I heard some no's, so he was just basically the 16th president of the United States. And during the Civil War, he once said, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth this continent, a new nation, conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And by that he was just referencing the Declaration of Independence, which was for all men to be equal. So, he wasn't the only one who had an opinion against racism, though. Just to name a few others, we have Martin Luther King Jr., Juan Baez, John Bunyan, and Madeleine Murray O'Hair, and the list goes on. So, question 4. Why are people racist? Can you think of a reason why people would be racist just off the top of your head? Part of this is because of something important, sense of belonging. So, what does that have to do with racism, though? What connection they have? Basically, too much of one good thing becomes a bad thing, so too much belonging becomes shutting other people out. And this can sometimes lead to racism because the groups that you're going to be shutting out are going to usually be people of a different culture, different race, or just basically a different background. And that's not the only reason why people are racist, though. For instance, people are also racist because they're quick to judge based on experiences, they're quick to judge based on other people's experiences, and people need someone to blame for their problems.
The final question you should ask is, what should you do when you're dealing with racism? The first thing you should do is make sure that you are safe. You need to be around other people and in a safe place. The second thing that you should do is, don't be afraid to second guess yourself. Maybe you misheard, or maybe they accidentally said it. You should also speak clearly, because if you were listening before, you should be around other people and in a safe place. And you never want to make the racist the victim by acting mad. The last thing you should do is you should educate them. Chances are this person's beliefs have been engraved in their minds since they were very little, but you can make them think differently.
So this goes back to our original question. How can we define racism? Well, I'm pretty sure that all the above points combined would make a pretty reasonable definition. So what if we conclude that racism is any sort of action directed someone against a different race based on the idea that the other race deserves so. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.